They didn't just win, they steamrolled. From the late 90s to the 2000s, Australia built a test team that dominated world cricket like never before. Ruthless captains, generational legends, and a mindset that made even the best teams crumble.
But how did this dynasty come to life? What made it so unbeatable? And how eventually did the rest of the world catch up? Along the way, we dive into iconic moments, behind the scenes stories, and a few spicy what ifs.
This is the story of Australia's greatest test team, the dynasty that changed everything.
Hello and welcome to the new episode of the Reverse Sweep Show. As ever, this is your host SS, and joining me as ever is my co host AB. How's it going, man?
All good SS. Just amazed by Joe Root crossing 13,000 runs this last test match. And there are only so many people who are ahead of him. And there is the record from Sachin that is at a big risk right now. But yeah, that's what I'm following along with IPL. What about you, SS? What are you following?
Yeah, football was on the mind for me this week, and it was a traumatic experience as a Man United fan. So let's dive straight into cricket. And it was very happy to see LSG punching again above its weight, and they are going to have a respectable mid-table finish. But now we are at the fag end of IPL, and my team is not going to play the playoffs, so my attention is straight away on to the WTC final. So I think we have something in store for the audience today, right?
Absolutely. So last time we discussed the West Indies dynasty in Test cricket, and since it is the Test season, so we continue with that theme. We talk about Test dynasties, and we talk about the team that took over the power from that West Indian team around 95s, and continued it into the 2000s. So we are talking about the Australian Test team from the 90s and 2000s, the formidable one. And SS, I'll pass it back to you to lay a quick context of how dominating this team was and why are we talking about them.
Yeah, interesting you say passing of the baton between West Indies and Australia because you mentioned it in the previous episode, the famous 95 series where it was a culmination of a 15-year dominance of West Indies when Australia went there and won. And it was like, if I have to use a Harry Potter analogy, that was like Voldemort's wand being passed, the Elder Wand, and the powers went to Australia. And even though it took a couple of years to solidify it with players coming through, but after the 99 World Cup, they became such a dominant force. Twice they had the 16 match win streak. Both times, inevitably, it was India to break that in Kolkata 2001 and in Perth 2008. But it is something that we always look back because we are 90s kids, right? AB, you would be looking back as a kid thinking about sleepless nights. Our players would think the same.
Absolutely. Like they were one team, if we played against them, then 99% of the chances were of them winning against us. Whether that was home, away, they dominated not just India, but all the teams across the world.
And they were stacked from top to down. Hayden, Langer, the Waugh brothers, David Martin, such a classy player and such underrated player. Ponting, Clark. Then you had number seven. You get everyone out, and then you have Gilchrist walking at seven. Then
Absolutely. The Ganguly interview in Breakfast with Champions, I mean, we could really see his spin out there that he get
and
everyone out and then out walks Gilchrist.
and it's such a testament to that team that your opposition captain is admitting to that fact. And then you had, of course, the Vaughan, McGrath, and the supporting cast. I mean, it's such sad to say it's a supporting cast, but they were so great in their own right. Gillespie and Lee. That was such a formidable team, and they would just go on anywhere in the world. You would know they are going to win. They would dominate ODI cricket as well. And today we are going to break down right from the start of the fundamentals of how that dynasty came to be and what led them to be such a supremacy for so many years that even till now there are remnants in place, and that's why they are so dominant that they're still playing WTC finals, unlike what we saw with West Indies, who faded away. I think it's very important to talk about a thing that we already discussed in the last episode, that in 85, when West Indies were at their absolute best, they won a series at home versus Australia 3-1. Then they go away and win. I think it was 3-0 at their home and 3-1 away. And I think that was a point where Kim Hughes' captaincy went to border. And then Australia went through they became like a mid-tier team, losing Ashes at home as well, not qualifying for the last stages of the World Cup at their home. And it took well good years for Taylor to come. Border left the team in a good situation, but it was Taylor and Steve Waugh later on who got the team going, brought in a new mindset in terms of captaincy, about tactical excellence, and also sports science and everything. We are going to talk a lot about it. And also, the great structure of Sheffield Shield finally gave a lot of results to them. I think the most important piece is Alan Border over here. He kind of brought the calmness to the entire team. The entire doldrums that Australian team went through, he was the guy who was able to trust on his players, even though they became like a middling team, they would still fight a lot. They showed a lot of grit, which is very Australian culture kind of a thing across sports. And when they had the right ingredients coming through in terms of good talent and West Indies fading away organically, inorganically, that's a what if that we continue to talk about in the last episode. Ultimately, Australia were able to punch. And when they started punching, the entire world had to just stop and say, yeah, we have given up. You are going to dominate for the next 10, 15 years. So I think it was actually what we saw in the 80s and the border captaincy that led to Taylor and Steve Warden working wonders for Australia.
Absolutely, and this was also a time when Australian cricket was at least 5 to 10 years ahead of world cricket. You could just see that marked difference every single time, right from the late 90s. The kind of pressure situations that they were able to win from, that no other team was able to do that.
So many signature wins. I mean, we of course look at. I remember the start of the 16 match win streak. They defeated India and Pakistan at home 3-0, 3-0. But that 5-0 win versus West Indies, I know West Indies were really struggling. They were losing home series against Pakistan, South Africa. But 5-0 beating a team that 10 years ago was completely, not even 10 years ago, like 6 years ago, completely dominant. And then that's what we often speak about. They have so many statement series wins. They have the big win in England as well. The last Australian team to win an Ashes was that Steve Waugh team in 2001 when you had Gilchrist filing in all cylinders. And I'm pretty sure that you have such examples as well of those statement wins.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, although we are talking about Test cricket, but this was a time when they dominated both the formats, both Tests and ODIs. And one of the biggest signature wins that I feel marked this Australian team was the '99 World Cup win. We all know how the tournament went. They were at a certain point of time, they had their backs against the wall. They were at the brink of elimination. And then Steve Waugh plays that innings. Herschel Gibbs drops the cup. And then they go into the semis. Alan Donald and Klusner have that run out, infamous run out. And then Australia goes to the finals and wins it. I think that was a moment which made world cricket stop and acknowledge the start of the dynasty that Australia team was building.
And it is so funny that an ODI cataclysmic event would have so much impact around the world because I think that was the moment where I think Australian team also had that feeling that now if we can survive and thrive through that and we have got such good players coming through, we can be an all-conquering team, which they became.
Which they became. And then the next win that I always remember, it wasn't a win. Like they came in as favorites when they came to India in 2001. And we know that is probably one of the most iconic series ever when we talk about tests in India. And one of the most iconic test matches that they played versus India in Kolkata. And right now, as an Indian cricket fan, it seems so weird to even think that a team would tour India and come in as favorites. And they were dominating India in the first test. They did that. Second test, for most of the test match, they did dominate India. Unfortunately for them, they ran into VVS Lakshman in top form, Dravid in top form, and then Harbhajan in top form. So otherwise, they would have been able to steamroll India even in that series, continued their streak. Like, but the sheer domination that Australian team in that period had made them really special.
I think we were talking off air, right? And I was telling you that for me, a sure shot sign of dynasty is you have excellent away record and you're winning big series away. I mean, they have won 5-0 in West Indies. They were consistently very dominant in South Africa, winning multiple series throughout the 2000s. They won a series finally in India in 2004 after the loss in 2001. They won an Ashes away as well. They were ruthlessly winning over New Zealand away as well. I mean, they were like all conquering side, any conditions. They had attack for everything. They had the big batting. They had got athletic fielding as well. They were so dominant. And I think this is the perfect time for us to go into the components. I mean, essentially, and because we have done just an episode on West Indies, it will be great to contrast between how both teams in their own ways were being effective, and we can set up those metrics of defining what a dynasty is. And maybe we can start there, AB.
Absolutely. So when I think about a cricketing dynasty, there are a few components which come to my mind. First and foremost is a leadership. With West Indies, we saw Clive Lloyd. With Australia, we see Steve Waugh. Cold, ruthless leadership that he brought, the mindset that he brought to the Australian team. A pressure is privilege. The entire vision that he drove for the entire team. So that is something which demarcates that period of Australian cricket. And if we really look at the record that Steve Waugh has had as a captain and compare that with some of the other great captains, his away win record was 67%. And compared to that, Kohli, like who is the most successful Test captain for India, has a record of around mid 40s. And the sheer difference between that shows how dominant Australia were in that phase. The second highest away Test win record for a captain is Ricky Ponting, again a part of that dynasty.
I think he's around 50%, if I'm not wrong. And that's just
Yeah,
crazy to think. Steve was 67% away record of success. I mean, that's mental.
yeah, absolutely. And that also shows in the records, right? They were able to do 16 consecutive Test wins twice, not just once, but twice. And that too in an era when at least one third of the Test matches used to end in a draw.
Yeah, we
Imagine
were we were
winning
talking
16 in a row.
Yeah, we were talking about in the last episode West Indies at 29 series and everything, but 16 match wins when the opposition could essentially make wickets that will guarantee them a draw, play defensively, bowl negative lines, but just eking, not even eking, they were dominating throughout, and they're doing it twice. That's crazy.
Absolutely. And one of the reasons for that is also the elite talent that they had, probably some of the best talent in the world. You have a bowling quartet of Vaughan, McGrath, Lee, Gillespie. I mean, that's a formidable lineup. And then in the batting lineup, you have the Waugh brothers, Matthew Hayden, Gilchrist. I mean, you can just go on and on. And not just the playing 11, but the players on the bench, they were equally good. And we saw that in multiple situations when they were able to step up and win games for Australia.
And big shout out to Sheffield Shield and the Australian Cricket Academy over here because they had the structures and processes in place. Because unlike Ranji and County, where you have like 25, 30 teams, you have like 6 or 7 core teams. So much competition to even get into those teams. So when you get into those teams and then start playing against each other, imagine the kind of competition and the kind of churning of talent that will come. So only the cream will rise to the top. And that's why we have so many examples. If there was a Ponting, a Mark Waugh, Steve and David Martin, you also had an Adam Voges, a Brad Hodge, a Stuart Law, who never or played 1 or 2 test matches here and there just because they couldn't get into the team. If they got to the team, they were so ready for it, making double hundreds, making hundreds, and they were so good. And I think that's a huge testament to the structure that, and a big shout out to the cricket administrators in Australia.
Absolutely. And that, for me, also, one of the signs of a team having a very strong playing 11 and bench strength is that a lot of your elite players actually make their debuts very late. We saw with Mike Hussey making his debut in 30s.
30s.
And that happens when you have such a strong talent pipeline.
And
That
I
it's
mean,
almost
there would be cases where people would leave Australia to play for some other country because they just couldn't get into. There were so many cases, and we will talk about more about Adam Gilchrist, I think, who is like the pivotal cog of this generational dynasty that we had. He had to switch associations as well, and he's not the only example just to get through because New South Wales, for example, were having the Waugh brothers. You had Brett Lee, you had Glenn McGrath. How will you even get into the New South Wales teams? Which is something that is still present today. You have Pat Cummins, Mitch Stark, Steve Smith, all as part of one team. That's absolutely crazy. But also, despite that competition at state level, you didn't have the problems that you had in West Indies, which were recognized at a far later state of those island associations fighting with each other. When it came to Australia and One Cricket Australia, you had selection keeping in mind the Australian success and not like a New South Wales or a Victoria success.
absolutely. And that also brings me to the third component of a dynasty, which is setting up team ethos and culture. This is such an underrated aspect, right? We talk about all these corporates having cultures, and culture becomes like a buzzword.
Yeah.
But when things actually click, that is when you see teams doing magically well in their tournaments. And that is what happened with this Australian team. Baggy Green became a symbol of achievement, of pride, and players played like that. There were no free passes to anyone. Everyone who came to the team knew their roles in and out. Absolute mental clarity. They even used sledging as a psychological tool. This Australian team, they were famous, or rather infamous, for that.
Yeah.
And we also saw how it led eventually to the 2008 Monkey Gate scandal. But this Australian team was formidable to play against, not just because of their skills, but also because of what they would put the opposition through when the opposition batters would come on the pitch.
And there's also a nuance to it as well, because life is not like you always pigeonhole a thing and that always works. There have to be nuances and you have to give way to that. You mentioned about Baggy Green being such an important symbol. I remember there was a book that I was reading. I think it was Shane Warne's book. They mentioned that Shane Warne and Mark Waugh were always like great friends, and they did not like this Steve Waugh pushing the baggy green thing. That whenever you are going to the Wimbledon as well, watching, you should all wear baggy green. I mean, they were like, yeah, I understand, we understand baggy green, but we don't want to wear that. So there was an element of John Buchanan and Steve Waugh duality over here working, that yes, it's team ethos and structures and processes over superstars, but they did recognize that there are some left field faces in our squad, but so we need to nurture them. And Marco and Shane Warne were the example of those superstar left field people, but they continue to nurture them because they were so good that it did not fall away from the system. So even though Waugh and Warren will not see eye to eye, and sometimes they won't. But when it comes to performing together, it's almost like a case of what we hear about Chicago Bulls sometimes. It's almost like that. Not everyone likes everyone. Not everyone likes Jordan, but they will do everything when they get onto the court or the pitch.
Absolutely. I like the points that you make, SS, and I take away a few key words from that. Systems, processes, John Buchanan, and I think that element of tactical evolution that this Australian team brought to the world cricket is what catapulted them 5-10 years ahead of all the other teams. And it took all these teams a few years, if not decades, to catch up. And this is definitely
Sports.
one thing which differentiated them and becomes a major component of this dynasty that they created.
Yeah, I was going to talk about sports science and medicine and getting the best technology usage. So it's like you have the riches coming from ICC. You know you have a great catchment audience as well. You are a developed economy. How do you make sure that cricket is one of the top sports? Cricket is the national sport of Australia. It's the favorite national pastime. Australia has been a very sporting nation, so they always succeed at the Olympics, but they always make sure that they're ahead. I mean, they're pushing the boundaries of athleticism, trying to get technology into it, best grounds in the world, best infrastructure as well, best training facilities, best coaching of excellence. Even the MRF Pace Academy, which India and Indian speedsters used a lot, has a Dennis Lilly as well there. So they have always been at the forefront of that, pushing the boundaries. And only when the other teams recognized that they need to close that edge, only then we had the case that Australia started losing its mojo, which we should talk more about now.
Yeah, but before we go there, I have a question for you, SS. We started this entire segment with the idea that we'll be able to compare the West Indies dynasty with the Australian dynasty. We have spoken about the components. What are your thoughts on the contrast between the two?
I think you spoke about the captaincy pretty well. I think Clive Lloyd's major role was that he needed to bring everyone together from different islets, and he had that kind of an respect that became an authority. I mean, Steve Waugh was like cold-blooded, we want to fucking win this. There was no other way. We just want to win it, and we will go ahead, sledge the opposition. Even though we will play placid wickets, we don't care. We believe on the talent. We will play with four bowlers. We know Test cricket is won by 20 wickets, as the West Indians show, because they played with a quartet of fast bowlers, that we want to win with 20 wickets. Australia said, we have got complete trust on our four bowlers. We will make placid wickets, we'll score a lot of runs, and we will put so much pressure on the opposition with our sledging as well, they will completely fold. So it's a different aggression. And I love that quote that says, West Indies won with fear, Australia's win was inevitable. I mean, it's crazy, but it is so correct to put it that way.
I absolutely love that quote, SS, and that kind of summarizes what I felt for most of my childhood watching Indian team play.
I think we all
I
did.
almost resonate with that pain.
Yeah, we all did. And I think you had more of a Jamaica Barbados kind of a like a healthy competition over there, which somehow I have always felt the Australians don't take it even to this date when they play for Australia. They might have it at Sheffield Shield level. So I think it's more of in West Indies case, there was a perfect blending pot of flair, a great captain, and an awesome quartet of fast bowlers working in tandem for those 10, 15 years. So I think that was a dynasty that had to run its course because of the realities of the world and realities of the commercialization. With Australia, because it is system and process oriented, that dynasty was, that even till this date, they haven't faded away because they have been able to use the commercial revenues, they have been able to garner the interest in the game that you will always have talent coming from Australia and they will often sit at the highest table of cricket.
Yeah, absolutely. Even though we don't say that the current Australian team is a dynasty, but they are still in the World Test Championship final for the second time. And imagine the strength of their domestic systems and that they're always able to churn out these players. I remember like when Michael Bevan retired, Mike Hussey came in and started finishing the matches for Australia. I mean, that was really unbelievable to think of. You have an elite player with a very niche role, and then you have such an exact replacement of him, and not just for this case, but across the squad. They have so many examples of that, and that's also because of the strong domestic system that they have.
I think I have one point around tactical stuff as well. I mean, West Indies had an awesome plan A, which was so good that for that era and that for that those opposition, they could not bridge the gap. And the plan A was four fast bowlers. We are going to attack you, and then we know that we have some flair batters that are going to make runs. We will lose test matches here and there, but we will do that. I mean, Australia had some flexibility to it. They had great batters, of course. You had Gilchrist at seven, that was like game changer as well, and that three-quarter length that McGrath with his height would get, which became like the new length that fast bowlers will bowl with. But then they also had an adjustment factor as well that when they lost the 2001 series to Australia, they studied Indians very closely. When they came in 2003 and 4, even though Ponting was injured, Ponting did not play that series. Gilchrist was the captain. They said, we are going to bowl narrow lengths, narrow line to Indians. They like to score in boundaries. They don't like taking singles. We'll bring the short mid on and short mid off in, and we will deprive Tendulkar and Lakshman of any kind of boundaries and Sehwag as well. Tendulkar was also injured for quite a long in that series, and Indians just couldn't make runs. They will get frustrated and get out. Sometimes they will play with spin. They had that option, which West Indies did not have. You will have McGill and Vaughan playing sometimes. That is why they were winning 3-0, 3-0 versus Sri Lanka and Pakistan away as well. They were super. I mean, so they had the bench strength and different varieties of winning. I think they had really good plan A, but also great plan Bs and C when needed. And that is why they were dominant for, I would say, both formats for a considerable amount of time and even to this date, which wasn't the case with West Indies.
Absolutely, and of course they dominated world cricket. But then there came a point of time when a lot of these legendary cricketers started retiring, and a lot of them did retire around the same time. And that was, I feel, one of the main reasons why the other teams, when the rest of the world cricket was slightly able to start catching up with the Australian team, in absence of once McGrath retired, Ward, Gilchrist, Steve Waugh retired much before. But then the vacuum that these players left, that I feel was also one of the reasons why Australian team lost that dynasty position, right? And what are your thoughts, Assess? What were the other factors that contributed to enabling the other teams to catch up with the Australian team?
I mean, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, every team, like the modern Indian team, is also going through transition. But when you are transitioning from such a legendary team, it will take a lot of doing. I think they were not able to replace to that caliber. I mean, you always had a Mitchell Johnson and Nathan Bracken, you had a Stuart Clark, you had Michael Clark, you had Mike Hussey. You had really good, but you couldn't get a replacement for Gilchrist to that level. Haddon was really good, but he was of course not Gilchrist. I also feel they lacked a spinner. They tried so many options, Horrocks, Michael Beer, Bryce McGain, but till you found Nathan Lyon, you really had that. So you were always getting beaten up in Asian conditions, and and South Africa also started ascending. So I think you hit the nail as well, and we talked about in the West Indies episode as well. There comes a time when others are able to catch up as well, and that becomes a big factor.
Right. And when we talk about catching up, and we earlier talked about Australian team being at least 5, 10 years, 15 years ahead of world cricket, I also feel around that time when T20 started around 2007, 2008, when it started to pick up, a lot of money started flowing into the game. The way people thought about the game, that changed. A lot of analytics started coming in, sports sciences coming in, teams using a more holistic approach towards how to develop a team, like psychological aspects of the game coming in. So I feel those are the kind of things which enabled other teams like India, South Africa, England to then level up and start competing with Australia, which they just weren't able to do for the last decade, decade and a half.
I know in our statistics class we learn about correlation is not causation, but somebody should do a PhD thesis on the advent of IPL and the decline of Australian Test cricket team. I know there might be a high R square as we talk about, but we will see if there is. But it's just a happy coincidence that both. It's like a guidance that the commercial world has already shifted to India, but now the cricketing world, like the on ground thing, will also shift to India.
Yeah, and that's so fascinating to think about, SS, how eliteness in the sport follows commercialization. We saw that with Australia. Australia was always the center of cricket commercialization, apart from England, of course, and a lot of innovation coming in from Australia
Yeah.
with Kerry Packer's World Series. And that eventually we discussed was a hindrance to how the West Indies cricket evolved, or rather something which the West Indies cricket missed out on. And same, I feel, is true here. Like IPL coming in India, changing how the cricketing world is, bringing the center of power to India, also giving India that edge.
Absolutely. I think it's time to go into our favorite section about what ifs. And I think I would like to ask you about one big moment I think we already touched upon, one of the most favorite moments in Indian fan history and cricket history as well. What if the 2001 Kolkata Test match or that series would have fallen a bit differently, things would have happened differently? What impact on the Australian dynasty and when we think about it?
See, just to put the record straight, this Australian team was dominating, probably the most dominating team that we have seen in our lifetimes. They were a dynasty, and nothing that happened around that time could have changed that. If Australian team would have won that Kolkata Test, I think they would have ended up steamrolling even India, 3-0 in India, which was also their final frontier. It still amazes me coming to India and being the favorites, and then dominating the first match that the way they did, and it required an absolute miracle of an innings by VVS Lakshman and Dravid to deny them that win in Kolkata, and then again an
A
amazing
lot of
performance
dodgy
by.
decisions on the final day of Kolkata Test, which a lot of people don't like to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think in terms of how the team would have evolved, they would still have been a dynasty. The thing that would have changed is probably Indians not getting that moment of pride that they had after that Kolkata match. Chetan Bhagat losing out on that book probably, and yeah. But apart from that, I think psychologically a lot of teams would have still felt that this Australian team is quite invincible, and that would have been a huge, huge barrier in the back of their minds. As you said, their win was inevitable, and it took a miracle to break that streak. And Kolkata match was that, and probably in absence of that, they would have stacked up maybe 20, 25 consecutive test wins. We don't know about that, but probably just a record that would have been too huge to break. So with that, I have one what if for you as well, SS. I know you are a big fan of the Ashes series, and I know you have been following them since a very long time. And I know one of your favorite and one of the best Ashes series of all times was 2005. And one of the matches, Glenn McGrath actually was ruled out because he twisted his ankle before the match, and that was a very pivotal point in that series. So, what if McGrath didn't twist his ankle and was fit to play that match?
Yeah, that was the start of the second test match. They had won at Lord's, 1-0 up. A lot of things went. I mean, if McGrath was fit, Australia was winning that series comfortably. We have talked about it in the past as well in season one. And then there were things that got really close. Edgbaston losing by 2 runs, some decisions going in either way in pre-DRS era, things would have happened. As I said earlier, if I see a certain team is reigning winner of series away in India, South Africa, and England, I think that's a dynasty in itself. And they were once close to doing that in India, which we talked about in the final frontier. And now, because they won 2004 in India, they were always winning in South Africa. They will just trounce New Zealand, Pakistan, Sri Lanka. This was, in a way, another frontier. If they would have done it against that formidable and like high vibe England team, I think that would have been the killer thing to West Indies and Australia. I mean, West Indies has got that nostalgic element everyone looks at, respect and fear. But if they would have done it statistically, I mean, they're already really, really top there, but I think they would have superseded. And I think that was a big, big sliding door moment because you know how media works as well. English media raised that, okay, Hayden exposed, Gilchrist exposed, Hogarth has got him, Simon Jones has got him. I mean, it was like a perfect storm that somehow Australia, even the great Australian team, could not pass.
Absolutely. So
I have a
let's.
point for you around people often say when we think about why things did not work out in the really, really long run, and was the switch from Waugh to Ponting worked very well, but from Ponting to Clark, maybe not that well. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, we spoke about the team culture, the ethos, and I feel the war to Ponting transition was almost natural. Very similar kinds of leaders, very aggressive on field, very strong mentally, have this very clear vision of how the team should play, and that also showed up in the way they played and dominated cricket at that point of time. But from Ponting to Michael Clark, I feel with everything that was going on around India coming to Australia, Monkey Gate scandal happening, I think there was a bit of that softening of that edge that Australian team had. Michael Clark, although tactically very astute
Great
and
tactical, methodical. I also feel that when he became captain, even though he had this kind of a friction with Ponting on style of leadership and style of captaincy, he kept Ponting far too long. And Ponting was also like Kohli, which Kimber talks about a lot recently, that they just went on for too long. But I think even with or without Ponting, they did not have the right bowling ingredients available, and missing of Gilchrist was a big, big factor. But yeah, definitely. I mean, within Clark, you heard a lot more about rumblings inside the dressing room as well.
yeah, and that is such a big factor, something that as fans we don't think as much about of what the environment within the dressing room is and the role that the captain has in ensuring that the dressing room is aligned towards the team's objectives and everyone feels that they know their roles, they know what they have to do day in and day out for the team. Now, I have another what if for you. And this is the Adam Gilchrist effect. What if Australia hadn't discovered a player like Adam Gilchrist who could completely turn around what a keeper meant for a team in cricket? And what if Australia had Adam Gilchrist, but we spoke about it offline as well. He did not have a very good start to his career. What if he was dropped and never called back?
Yeah, I mean, I would think that a big moment was actually him moving from North New South Wales to Western Australia. If he would have delayed on that move and wasn't playing regular cricket, because I know Western Australian crowd also did not like him when he went over there. If these things affected him, uh, even I think his debut was in Gabba. He played well actually in that game, but again, the Gabba crowd did not like it too much. If these things did not work out, a freak injury, anything could have happened. Australia would have lost out like a Jack Callis kind of a thing. He's literally playing with 12 players with him in the team. So aggressive, game changer. You wouldn't expect like a number seven to come out there when your opposition bowlers are tired at 80 over 90 over mark. He was like a complete game changer. And I think without him, this team is not dominant at all. Even though you might have had like a Haddon in, but you wouldn't get that consistency. You wouldn't get that thing. And there were moments as well. 2005 Ashes we talked about. Gilchrist was in awful form. He hadn't done well in India as well back in 2001. In 2005 itself, he walked off against Bangladesh like he often did, and some analyst and the team itself did not like it. These are the moments. If we would have been chucked off, maybe the 2007 whitewash of England wouldn't have happened. So there were moments, even though he was fairly consistent. I think uh, if Gilchrist somehow did not cope up with his initial troubles in domestic cricket well, uh, I think he could have been lost in this Australian system because you had so much talent coming through. If you don't perform well, uh, and if you're not trusted enough by the system, you could have lost away. And I think Australia would have lost a big, big cricketer. So there you have it, guys. I think from Clive Lloyd to Steve Waugh, from Ambrose to McGrath, from domination to dismantling, dynasties tell a lot about the game that we really love and the legacy around it. Australia didn't just dominate, they changed the very expectation of what you expect from a great team.
Yeah, and as we reflect on that golden generation, we ask, will the world ever see such domination again? And or has cricket moved past that age where a single team could dominate like the Australians did back in the 90s and 2000s?
Yeah, the Rocco generation is off. Now we are in Gill season, as we like to say. So maybe this is the thing, or maybe the Australian cricket will continue to transition well, and maybe they will learn from the last experience and transition even better this time, and so that they will be so dominant. But there you have it, guys. This was today's episode. Thank you for tuning in, and you will see a lot from us on social media platforms and on YouTube. And till the next time, take care. Bye bye.